Beyonce, even though she's, I guess, one of the biggest music stars ever, I find her music to be awful, unlistable, and just quite honestly just noise. It's not music. It's disgusting. Yep. Can you believe that Charlie Kirk openly trashed the work of one of the biggest pop icons in the world, calling Beyoncé's music not just not his taste, but trash, unlistenable noise, and disgusting? I mean, that's a lot more than an A. I don't vibe with her critique. It's a full-on dismissal. But you know what? When he decided to come for Queen Bey, to many folks, it was not just his usual culture war ranting, but yet another example of how his attacks always seem to land hardest on women, people of color, and marginalized voices. Basically, this conversation hasn't just been about Beyoncé. It's been a wider conversation about how some people have been saying that Charlie Kirk mightily helped cement the rage and division that seems to define the United States. People are saying that Kirk helped create this toxic, poisonous stew we are drowning in, and he not only fed it but profited from it. According to these people, while we acknowledge that the way he died was wrong on many levels, we must also acknowledge that Kirk's legacy of bigotry, sexism, Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia, and comments about people of color have been well documented. Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks. We would have been called the butt. Now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know you do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's dribble. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of unfortunately some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe. Okay. Of course, it's still trending that Charlie Kirk, a well-known conservative activist in the United States and staunch ally of President Donald Trump, was unalived at an event at Utah Valley University, where he briefly clutched his neck from the hit before collapsing from his chair, sending attendees fleeing, and the sight of everything was truly horrific. As for the details of what exactly happened, he was addressing an outdoor crowd of roughly 3,000 people at the first of at least 15 scheduled stops on a nationwide tour organized by Turning Point USA, the conservative group he co-founded. Then, while Kirk was taking questions from the audience, he was then seen clutching his neck and falling from his chair with blood gushing from the wound. He was then rushed to a nearby hospital where he later died. Based on reports, the hit came from the Lucy Center about 20 minutes after Kirk began speaking, and drone footage of the campus taken after everyone was evacuated shows police tape coordinating off a section of the Lucy Center's roof. The distance from the corner of the Lucy Center to where Kirk was sitting is approximately 140 yards, well within the effective range of most rifles, meaning the hit was professional. The motive still unknown. Anywho, the death was announced on social media by Trump, who praised the 31-year-old Kirk and co-founder and CEO of the youth organization Turning Point USA as great and even legendary. Later, he released a recorded video from the White House in which he called Kirk a martyr for truth and freedom. He blamed the rhetoric of the radical left for the incident. Utah Governor Spencer Cox also described the incident as a political assassination and expressed deep concern over the state of national discourse. But other than making headlines for the manner in which he died, we have people online saying that Kirk doesn't deserve remorse because he was a wicked man who showed total disregard for marginalized groups. Child. He once said that prominent black women did not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. Yeah, he actually said that. For context, Kirk was speaking on his show, The Charlie Kirk Show, and he was talking specifically about television presenter Joy Reid, former First Lady Michelle Obama, then U.S. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, a Democrat from Texas, and Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. He named these 4 black women and said these words, adding that the admission that they had benefited from affirmative action amounted to a confession that they were not bright enough to reach prominence on their merits. In his words, If we would have said 3 weeks ago that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the butt. Now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. He actually went on and played a clip of Jackson Lee speaking in Congress, saying she had been admitted to educational institutions on affirmative action, and added, we know it's very obvious to us you are not smart enough to be able to get it on your own. I could not make it on my own, so I needed to take opportunities from someone more deserving. We know it's very obvious to us that you were not smart enough to be able to get in on your own. I couldn't make it on my own, so I needed to take opportunities from someone more deserving. You know, this is how arrogant Joy Reid and Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee are. They're so narcissistic. They think this is persuasive. They think we're like, oh, of course that's why we need affirmative action, because you have impressed us with your brilliance. Of course. Oh no. Imagine the world without Joy Reid. Imagine the world without Sheila Jackson Lee or Michelle Obama or Ketanji Brown Jackson. They think this is persuasive. They think, as they kind of now reveal, that I'm only here because of anti-white, anti-Asian forced discrimination policies that turn me into a bitter, resentful activist that hates white people. Honestly, obviously these comments were upsetting to many people, especially considering Joy Reid went to Harvard for her undergraduate degree. Michelle Obama went to Princeton and Harvard Law School. Sheila Jackson Lee went to NYU, transferred to Yale, and later attended UVA Law School. Ketanji Brown Jackson attended Harvard University for her undergraduate degree and Harvard Law School. What people said was that Kirk saying that these highly educated women do not possess the brain processing power to be taken seriously is problematic, especially since he attended Harper College for 1 semester before dropping out. People also said that Kirk's assertion that these women are stealing a white person's slot is troublesome, because it implies that only white people are entitled to prestigious roles like First Lady or talk show host or Supreme Court Justice. But honey, Kirk didn't just stop there. We are talking about someone who also point-blank period said, if I'm dealing with somebody in customer service who's a moronic black woman, I wonder, is she there because of her excellence or is she there because of affirmative action? Actually, let me just run down a few other comments he made concerning race. If you're a WNBA pot-smoking black lesbian, do you get treated better than a United States Marine? Happening all the time in urban America. Prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people. That's a fact. It's happening more and more. If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. Baby, that comment on black pilots is actually also another one that has made rounds as of late. And Kirk said those words during a conversation on thought crime, a panel discussion segment he hosted with Jack Pobiak as part of the Charlie Kirk Show podcast. In the episode, Kirk Pobich and other guests Andrew Kovic and Blake Neff discussed diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives for airline pilots. While Kovic said, we've all been in the back of a plane when the turbulence hits or when you're flying through a storm and you're like, I'm so glad I saw the guy with the right stuff and the square jaw get into the cockpit before we took off. And I feel better now thinking about that. On the other hand, Kirk straight up said, no, I mean like you want to go thought crime. Like, I'm sorry. If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. You wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have done that before. That's not an immediate who I am. That's not what I believe. It is the reality the left has created. You know, he was later asked at an event about the statement in question by a black attendee who asked if he felt his earlier comments about DEI pilots were irresponsible. And this is how he responded. Therefore, when it comes to pilots or surgeons, if I see somebody who is black, as I said on the show, I'm going to hope that that person is qualified. That's what I said, which of course is legitimate because they're begging the question, we're not hiring based on merit anymore. We're hiring based on race. Oh, we also called Martin Luther King Jr. awful and not a good person, while insisting we made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s. Hold on, y'all. It gets worse. On gender, feminism, and reproductive rights. He responded to a question about whether he would support his 10-year-old daughter removing a pregnancy conceived because of grapes on a debate show. And he was like,